So I did my presentation on JP Morgan, and first question was, why do you think JP Morgan is the most influential, even though he wasn't the wealthiest or the most powerful man of his time? The reason I think he was the most influential was part of because he had a really big cause and effect factor on how we run business today. And I think that's part of the reason that he is the most influential, is because even though Andrew Carnegie or Vanderbilt were worth more, they didn't do as much to cause as many business regulations as he did, like the mergers and the monopolies and stuff like that. He didn't cause that many laws to be set in place like that. But second question was, do you think what J.P. Morgan did was fair, and the government limiting him was seen as an act of aggression against the government? I think that I think the government limiting him was fair because J.P. Morgan was at his time. I think the way capitalism is set up is to help the people, and I think that if J.P. Morgan had been allowed to continue this, it would have instead benefited him more than it would the people. And capitalism is set up for competition, and if competition isn't there, then people don't get the lowest price. And I think if he had been allowed to go on that, he would have probably been more powerful than the government if the government didn't stop him. So I think what the government did wasn't that they seen it as an act of aggression, but they were protecting the people's best interests. Question three says, if J.P. Morgan was seen as most influential, who did he have to go through to become the most powerful, or who was more powerful before him? I think Carnegie and Vanderbilt were your top two contenders before him because they necessarily didn't have a monopoly, but well, they did, but it was Rockefeller. Rockefeller had pretty much a monopoly on oil. I think the fact that he had to go through them was those were his probably biggest predecessors because they caused a lot of issues to do with oil, and that's probably why J.P. Morgan got the idea to create the monopoly like Rockefeller did, where he made Standard Oil, and they had to break that up into 9 different companies because what they were realizing was is that J.P. Morgan was able to control so much of the oil price that he was able to control that economy, and I think that that was probably J.P. Morgan's biggest enemy. I think that's exactly why J.P. Morgan probably did what he did, is because he saw that he could be better than that monopoly as a whole. But question four is, how did J.P. Morgan get so wealthy so fast to begin this empire? J.P. Morgan he was a risk taker. That's what all business people are. But he was born to a pretty wealthy family, starting off knowing money and having to manage it. And as he grew up, he started getting incredibly smart with it. And the fact that he took so many risks into industries and was turning them over, like the railroad industry, he was taking so many gambles that he could turn these businesses around, was how he got wealthy so quick because he was he was actually able to predict, kind of like an economist, he was able to predict what market was going to expand next, and he predicted right, and that's how he got so wealthy so quick, was because when he predicted that railroad was going to expand and blow up in the economy, or boom is what they call it, he invested in it, and when he did that, that's where he made his money at. uh, Question five, do you think JP Morgan bailing out the government was a good thing or a bad thing? I think it was a good thing because I think it proves how our government and our economy can go hand in hand. How the government can also they can put regulations on businesses to help the people, but since the government's in charge of keeping people safe and making sure that we always have like a society or structured system, every now and then the business side kind of bailing out the government, as even though the government does do the regulations on businesses. I think it's all I think it was a good thing because it shows that we can have the relationship with businesses and a government that's combined to help the people and not to hurt them. But at the same time, it can show corruption between business and government, like how him bailing him out could maybe put the government into his favor, or how um, government selling their own like saved up oil for like the military, like they were selling military reserve oil to these big businesses because they could make money off of it. I think it just goes both ways. It could show corruption or it could show a great relationship. It's one of those. It could be up for interpretation. But that was all the questions that we had.